Have you ever wondered how those best improv actors just make it look so easy on stage? How they can just take the seemingly mundane topic or idea or story from the audience and run with it, and how it just works together and how they sync up and create these hysterically funny skits and shows that just blow your mind. Well, I've oftentimes wondered how we as leaders can integrate some of those improv skills into the work that we do. And so I sought out a couple of folks from the Curtis Needs a Ride improv trope or team based in Dallas, Fort Worth. And they shared some of their insights around what are those fundamental improv skills that we as leaders can take on and learn and put into practice to drive innovation, drive collaboration, help us deal with, failures and inclusivity with our teams, and how do we get people into that positive space to be able to identify those opportunities and creative outcomes that we all strive to achieve. I think you're going to like this episode. I think you're going to really like Michael Flusche and Austin Hines, both from Dallas, Fort Worth. So let's jump on stage, and we get to even practice a little bit of improv during this episode, which I think you'll find funny and quite insightful, hopefully. I'm Tom Athenour, your host from the Leader to Leader podcast, and let's join in on the conversation. It is good to have a couple of great improv guys with me today. I've been looking forward to this episode because we're going to be looking at improv and how do we integrate some improv skills into the practice of leadership. And so today I am joined by Michael Flusche and also Austin Hines, two improv actors who are based in Dallas, Fort Worth area in Texas. And it's a pleasure to have both of you. So welcome to the Leader to Leader podcast.
Hey, glad to be here.
Thank you. Awesome. Good to see you guys. So if I were to bump into you and I didn't know you and I said, so who are you guys? What do you do? What is this improv thing, that you do, and how did you get into it? How would you introduce yourself and share a little bit about how you got into this particular practice area? So Michael, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. Improvisational comedy has a important place in my life. I went off to college at the great TCU here in Fort Worth. And what I found was I was looking for community. And one of the things that I always wanted to do and that I had done some work in was improvisational comedy, which, at the time there's Whose Line Is It Anyway? There's other shows. And I think generally I just love to perform. And it was a way, improv is a little easier to jump into because everybody could do it. And all you need to do is show up and give some effort, and you could improvise. We could all improvise. We are improvising right now. And so I found a community there at TCU that was performing every week, and they trained us up. And again, it was so cool to be there because you found a lot of like-minded people. You found a lot of people who were looking for their group at TCU. And I had a major and I had other leadership responsibilities, but really, I think I really found out a lot about myself by joining that improv community. And so when I think of what improv is, I just think about it as putting on plays or skits or games on the spot, hoping to entertain people. And it's been a journey because it's not always easy to make people laugh, but it's been so fun for me. It's been my little community, and just it's crazy to me that happened over 20 years ago, and here we are. Little did I know that guy named Austin Hines, who I started doing shows with in 2004, would still be performing with me here today. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. But Austin, I guess you have a similar story.
Yeah, very similar. Loved improv in high school. At TCU, just wanted to have fun. So tried out and made it onto the troupe. And we were a very successful troupe. I mean, especially for like a college. Every Thursday night, there might be 200 people that would come to our shows, which was fun for us and also forced us to put on a good show and make it worthy of having 200 people come and watch us. Then when we graduated, we didn't want to stop. So we formalized our own improv group and started performing. And then a few years later, we realized that we needed to also make money to live, and performing comedy shows randomly on weekends and stuff. It's hard to be profitable. But all the skills that we had been learning, we discovered that they are useful in the workplace, in different environments, different communities. And so we took the improv skills that we had been practicing for years and crafted different workshops and professional developments so that we can go out into the workforce and make a business out of it and try to help people out.
Awesome. That's great. And you guys are pretty good, because I had the opportunity to attend a weekend event, and you're pretty good. And then also you were at a leadership conference recently with one of our clients and did a superlative job in how you sort of took this whole practice of improv and wove it into, or maybe sort of took leadership and wove it into improv, or took improv and wove it into leadership. I don't know which it was. I think it was more the latter, but it really was an interesting exercise. And so this is great to have a conversation, because I think our listeners out there are dealing with a lot of uncertainty. I was with a group last week, and a big part of the focus was, we're trying to lead in this uncertain world, and we're having to make decisions in areas that we have not had to make decisions. And so these are uncharted waters. And so we started talking last week about improv. And so when you think about leadership and the practice of improv, what are some skill set areas that you have found to be most helpful for leaders to embrace and learn how to do in dealing with some of this? Because improv is a lot of uncertainty. You don't know what's coming next. So you're on the fly. So talk to me a little bit about how it integrates and where leadership sort of integrates and sort of converges with improv.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways we could take that. And I would say, to summarize it, I think improv provides the opportunity to provide some object lessons for some big ideas that are hard to illustrate in other ways. So I think when you think about leaders and kind of the needs that are going on right now, you think about getting people engaged with the work. And I think with improv, it says, hey, if you can provide effort, if you could just show up and be present and listen, you are going to be able to contribute to making something, which in improv is usually making people laugh, but also just making something creative and innovative along the way. So I think there's an aspect there that just says, hey, come as you are, give some effort. And there's research to back that up. That's been one of the cool things about improv and some of the work that I've done, is I've spent time connecting it not to just improv works for the sake of improv, but improv really connects and brings researched themes to life a little bit. And we've talked about that, Tom, of having a growth mindset. And part of having a growth mindset is saying that if you do put in the effort, you will already be successful, and that will lead to successful outcomes. And so I think improv embraces that. I think improv also embraces when you have a group of people and they have a variety of ideas, when they bring them to the table, how do you manage that? If Austin and I enter into a scene, can we do a scene real quick, Austin? If I were to say a first line and you gave me a second line, and we're just making this up as we go, but if I said, hey, Steve, don't forget to go to the grocery store today.
That's right. We got a big birthday party tonight, fella.
That's right. And so, like, I'm laughing at this because I had no idea what Austin was going to say. I put him on the spot. But I created a new context out of nowhere that Austin just has to say yes to, and that general idea of yes and. And I think in the corporate world, or at schools or at churches, and really in these team kind of situations that we get ourselves in, it's sometimes hard when you have egos and personalities trying to jump out and say, hey, it's got to be my idea. But I just put out a simple idea that we got to go. And Austin brought his idea, added to it, and now we're building towards something in a scene. And that's what improv does. It kind of helps you organize, but it also embraces ideas from different people. So there's an effort dynamic, there's a team and idea dynamic, and there's several. I don't know, Austin, what am I missing here?
Oh, so much. Um,
That's
no,
great.
I mean, it's the fundamentals of improv that can like change a work environment or change, a personality. And when it comes to like leadership or managing a team, if you have a bad culture or environment within your group, it's going to be impossible to move forward or to make those giant leaps forward that you probably want to make. When it comes to something that sounds simple, just like positivity, so much research that, I mean, we go through in workshops that just show how positivity can change your ability to make decisions and work together. And
Yes.
if those simple things aren't things that you like practice or know how to do well, then you're not doing as much as you could be doing.
Okay, so let's break this thing down. You talked about the fundamentals of improv. You both are actors. This is what you do. But for all of us other guys out there who are not actors, give us some fundamental. Give us what are we talking about when we talk about fundamentals of improv?
Yeah, and one thing we all would definitely have to start out and explain whenever we go in front of a group is we're not trying to teach anyone to be funny. It will probably be like a fun day, or we're going to do fun exercises. But one, we kind of request, don't try to be funny. That's not what, it's probably not going to work out very
Austin's
well.
great at that. He really is. Austin's a great example of someone not being funny. Yeah, that's really.
And so we are using these improv skills and games to work on things that will help in the business world. For instance, yes and, one of the most simple beginner improv things ever. You take an idea, you say yes to it, you're being positive, you're accepting, and you add an and, which means you build onto it. And so that's where scene work goes, like that wonderful scene you might remember from a moment ago, where Flusche says we're going to the grocery store, and I say yes, and add on to it, there's a birthday party we got to plan for. And then he builds on that. And if that's a mindset you take into the workplace and interacting with your customers, your boss, whoever, you are going to be more successful.
And so is the idea, so you have to suspend, you have to release your vision of where you're going with the story. Am I understanding? So I get the yes and, but you have to be able to then be totally present in how the other person responds to then be able to go, because it's a yes and with what the other person says, right? And so you have to have a clear, open mind around where this thing could go, because otherwise you're going to try to circumvent it back to where you think it ought to go. Am I understanding that right?
Correct. Yeah. Part of the point is that you're building it together. And so you don't know where you're going. And then as you figure out where you're going, you get there together.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah. Fundamentally, you are making it with someone. That I can't make this. I mean, again, it's the difference between stand up and improv. In stand up, you are by yourself. You create lines of dialogue, you test them in front of people, and you hope over time that they'll be funny because you've crafted the perfect setup, punchline, and act out. Improv says, I don't know where we're going, but I do know we're going there together, and that I am a piece of the puzzle, but my partner also has a voice, which is sometimes it's maddening because it's risky. It says that our funniest ideas or our most interesting or creative ideas come together with you sharing your viewpoint in this. And that's hard because if you want to be in control, if I think I've got the funny line and I'm trying to jump out there and do it instead of us doing it together, actually I'll make both of us look bad because I'm being risky with it, whereas I could work on it together. And if we stumble upon something together, there's just something more meaningful. It's kind of like when you have jokes with your friends that are hard to replicate when you share them, when you get out of it. It's like you just had to be there. That's the beauty of improv. You just have to be there because we're building it together.
Okay. So the building it together is a critical piece of this. You don't know where you're going. You don't know what the unknown is going to look like. But what I do know is that we're going to do this together as a team, as a collective, whatever it is. That's what I'm hearing.
And you have that comfort of knowing someone is going to be there so that if you fall, they pick you up. They're not going to try to make you look bad. You're not going to try to make them look bad. You can release all the fear that would come with having to go perform a scene and hope it's funny or hope people laugh, because you know you've got people there with you to make it successful.
Okay. Which I would guess that improv is just may come naturally with high performing teams because they really are working collectively together and they try to create that safety to bring up wild ideas as opposed to being cautious about being wrong. I would guess that improv might be more something you would use with a high performing team that has got a pretty good level of trust. Is that a fair read?
For sure. It's easy to jump ahead and, I mean, not stay at just the beginner 101 level all day if you do have a team. I mean, we might spend a few hours trying to get people to not be afraid, just to come out of their shell and just
Okay.
to stand in front of people and kind of be comfortable doing anything. Just standing there is terrifying for some people. So
Yeah.
yes, if there's a team that's already comfortable and there's just no fear left, they're able to work together and do something silly or weird, then yeah, we can progress much, much further, much quicker.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, can
So
I
the
throw something
fun.
out there too,
Yeah.
real
Yeah.
quick?
Go,
Sorry.
Michael.
Just this conversation reminded me of a moment in one of the collaborations we had where I went out there in front of a room of like 70 or 80 people, and we had just interviewed and talked to people about a city. And I went out there and said we were in the city, and I named the city completely incorrectly. And so I'm thinking I'm about to get this huge joke from or a huge laugh from the crowd because I'm referencing something that we now all know about. We're all in it together, but I got it completely wrong. But Austin was on stage with me, and he was able to step out and say, like, he basically, I don't want to say make fun of me, but he knew he was there to have my back, and he clarified. And once he clarified and let the audience know that I'm an idiot and made a mistake there for a second, he and I got to share in this huge laugh together because he had my back, whereas otherwise I would have looked dumb. So that's just the power of, like, when you have someone who has your back, which how many people need that in the workplace or at home or otherwise, to know that if you even go out there and make a mistake, you're going to be supported. And that, again, that's the beauty of improv.
Wow. Okay. So that's a critical component in this, that we're in this thing together, and I'm not going to throw you under the bus. So say, for example, we had a team that was trying to, maybe they were a bit reserved or a little bit more cautious. They ultimately realized that they need to contribute more and hear from some of what we would call sort of the more silent voices in the team system, people that don't typically speak up. We could use improv to bring forth their voices. So am I reading that right? You could say yes, and what do you think, Michael? Or you could facilitate the yes and just in a very simple way with it, trying to get more collaboration and input within a team.
Yeah, for
Right.
sure. A lot of people, right, sometimes just don't speak up because they're just not comfortable speaking up in a group. Maybe they have great ideas, but they just have never been comfortable speaking up. Yes, and like our workshops, when we kind of force people to speak up and give them, the stakes are low when, we're not asking for huge ideas. Nothing's going to change in the company. We're just doing things like, yeah, having you speak up. And maybe after you get comfortable speaking up, the next team meeting, yeah, it's not so weird anymore just to say something.
Absolutely, because the reason why oftentimes people don't speak up is they feel like their perspective or their opinion doesn't matter or it's not good enough, and so they back off. And what improv skill, this fundamental skill, could help bring people forth, as opposed, because they're not fearful of being criticized or evaluated in the integrity of their opinion or comment. Right? It's a way to create some safety around that. So
Yeah, that's a great one of the things that we talk about are different types of uncertainty. And again, this is a research based practice of, do we have structure around uncertainty that we work in? Meaning, if I'm in a place where I don't know what to do or I don't know how to exert myself, is my office space, is my work site a place where I feel comfortable being in that mess and being in uncertainty? Or is it a place that repels me and I don't get motivated? I don't put in my creative, innovative self because that structure is not there. I think improv highlights that. In fact, it celebrates that. And Austin's right. It's so hard sometimes for people to see themselves as capable as doing those things. And improv kind of peels those layers back and says, no, let's do it in a fun way, and kind of discuss what that then looks like at our office.
Yeah. And I could see how it would also create a sense. You called it positivity. Some people might call it creativity. It's very similar. You're going to come up with better, more creative ideas if you're operating in that positive sort of growth mindset rather than clamping down on things and narrowing the focus. So it's really about, you could use
Yeah.
this for expansive type thinking. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people exert themselves in areas where they feel like the the culture allows them to and allows them to be successful. But I think they also exert themselves or they're motivated when they see themselves as capable. And I think that's one of the discussion points we have in our presentation is the context in which people work in an area where they feel like they can be successful, but also do they see themselves as successful? And I think those go hand in hand of is the environment allowing them? And that could be risky to step out and maybe you do have a quiet person that just wants it to be a normal day job. They clock in, they clock out. I think improv says, don't just show up, share your voice because it's going to help us we need it to get to where we need to go. And sometimes that's uncomfortable at first, but again, I think you create a culture that says we need you, we need what you have to offer here, and it can be really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially when it comes to like a leadership or like a high stress decision making environment, maybe you're not just trying to be creative to have a new innovative idea, but there's kind of an emergency in the office or something. If you're stuck in kind of a negative or a fear response sort of mindset, that is going to limit your ability to make decisions. Like the realm of possible decisions is smaller for your brain if you're operating under fear or negativity. So if you practice and are able to be positive through any sort of situation, you'll be able to get through more situations.
Okay, so let's play with this thing a little bit, and actually, would you guys be willing to like demo? And I'll play the game too. I'll sort of be your stand up, and
That's
then
fine.
because it's like I think it'd be great to actually demo how to do this thing by taking a workplace, or maybe you tell me how to demo it. How do you demo it when you teach this to other leaders?
Yeah, let's go around and do a little yes and.
Okay, let's do it.
So I think we've kind of explained the premise, but yeah, Tom, you know what to do. So Flu, why don't you start? And I don't know, I guess everyone knows his last name is Flusche. I call him Flu sometimes, but have to explain to people. It sounds weird if you don't know where that nickname came from.
Yeah.
Okay, so Flu, you're gonna start us out. So Flu, you take the lead,
and then
I'll jump in after Austin. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. And for those playing at home, with improv and with this activity, we're all one person, meaning we're a kind of a collective I. So I'm going to make a singular statement, and the expectation is that the person after me is listening to what I say, and they're yes-anding, they're building off of it. So a non-example, can I do a non-example with Austin if I said, if I pretended to be, I went to pick up my kids today, and it went to Austin. This is a non-example.
I don't have any kids, so it was really weird.
Right. So that's a quick joke, and we might get a cheap laugh out of it. But again, as Austin said earlier, our goal isn't necessarily to be funny. I think we're going to get there. Our goal is just to build off of and go somewhere with it, be creative and innovative. So now we'll do the real example. So I will say, and I'll turn it over to Austin here. I bought a bouquet of flowers today.
Yes, and my wife is going to love them for our anniversary night.
Yes, and I don't know that my wife has seen flowers for a while.
Yes, my wife hasn't seen flowers in a while, and I need to do a better job of pursuing her.
Yes, and I wrote this card to explain how much I love her and how many days it's been since she's seen flowers.
Yes, and the particular flower that she likes is red roses.
Yes, and I have to buy a lot of roses because I've been spending a lot of time out with the boys.
Yes, and those boys actually wrote letters also because I want to give my wife a bucket full of letters and roses.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
this is good. Okay, so this is really good. So it requires what I'm sensing on my end. I have to really listen to what you're talking. It's like I can't be thinking about where I want to go. I got to really peg off of you, Austin, in this
You
example.
do. Yeah, it helps and it hurts if you don't.
Yeah, no kidding, because it really does show up, doesn't it? Yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
when we do these activities with companies, it's so funny. Someone will say, like, if I were to use our example of what we just did, like, yes, and I need to buy roses to apologize to my wife, and the next person will be like, yeah, you really screwed up. Like, they'd rather take a bird's eye view and make fun of the person before them, as opposed to jump into the activity and make it something that we share. And there's a big difference, and that happens at work, right? Instead of us embracing the problem in front of us, I'd rather just blame Johnny over there and make fun of him. And so, again, there's these little moments that highlight these real life dynamics, I feel like, in the workplace.
okay, so let's take a workplace example. Throw out a workplace example. So, say for example, we start with, we're, our team is really trying to be more efficient and be more efficient with resources, and that's the big mandate from corporate. So I'd put that out there and say, okay, so team, how would you address this? Could you use improv in that example?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it starts with, I mean, we can go down the road of that example in particular, but I think it goes down with, if we are, as you were saying, we're not utilizing resources, we're going to take some time to get some feedback from the people around us of, like, well, what has that been looking like? What does that look like from you? What's your feedback on that? Kind of enter into the conversation as opposed to it just being a mandate that's kind of a people-less, I guess. Austin, what would you say?
Yeah, so I mean, we kind of brainstorm first, kind of, to get ideas and see just what does that mean to everyone? Does everyone even on the same page with what that means? Or like, we worried about printer paper, or, are we
Right,
worried about
right.
whatever, some multi-million-dollar decision?
Yeah.
But right, get on the same page with everybody and have a goal with everybody. And if it's a goal that somebody like from the team kind of established, they're going to take more ownership over it.
Yep.
And so maybe you are already going to give out these 5 ideas, but if you let them come up with those 5 ideas, then they take some ownership, they work on it themselves. Maybe there's kind of a prize or a reward structure or whatever, but they get to benefit in something that they help decide to do.
Okay. So in that particular case, we could apply this skill set from the standpoint of, we're trying to utilize resources more efficiently. And we're also looking at processes that could be streamlined or reduce costs around processes. So those are a couple of ideas just off the top of my head. But what do you all think, team? Or what are some things that you could sort of in that process efficiency? How might you approach it? I'm role modeling or kind of real playing it a little bit with you guys because I want our leaders, our listeners to listen. Okay, so how do you actually do it? How would you tee it up? That's what we're trying to get to.
Yeah, and I think these are good examples too. And it goes back to, I feel like, something we talked about earlier of, like, you know, are are we engaging with people, and what are the stakes in some of this too? Like, I think that is something I have learned with doing this with companies of, well, we've got to make some tough decisions about maybe utilizing resources or time or personnel or whatever. Have we done this in the little moments too of just, it could be how we do fun things around the office. It could be just kind of low stake decisions that are happening each day, what goes on in the break room, or what type of coffee we buy or whatever. So I'm not trying to avoid the example you gave, but it does make me wonder, how much have you prepared the people that you're asking to do this to engage with this conversation in the first place? And that's
Okay.
that I feel like that's important as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And is it presented as just a negative or as a problem, or is every problem approached with optimism because this is just something else we get to do together and we're going to figure it out?
That's a good distinction, because if you have that problem orientation, meaning you're zeroing in on the problem, everybody's focused in on solving that particular problem versus what are we trying to accomplish? I could see where improv might be more valuable as we're brainstorming ideas around what potential outcomes or things that we could do that would ultimately accomplish this outcome. I could see where it could be yes, and we've tried this, but we learned from that, and you could kind of keep it going. It's an energetic, creative tool, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I
But
think
what are
there's
we?
an energy to it.
But you have to set the stage with your team on what it is you're trying to get to, and let's practice a little bit of this improv and see where it goes. We may come up with an idea that perhaps we hadn't even thought about. That's the idea, right?
Totally. And maybe we'll come up with an idea that if that doesn't work, and we have to pivot from that. We talk a lot about fear of failure and what that is, of like being willing to, for the sake of all of us being on a level playing field of being problem solvers in this scene together. That might mean we take a choice and we got to support the choice. In fact, our motto is relentless support creates limitless potential. We do believe that we could support, but maybe we find out along the way that that wasn't the best option, and then we can go to the next bus stop together and say, let's support and move on from that. I think it's almost like it's a system, it's a structure of support that improv is kind of mirroring and encouraging. That may not be normally there when you're just trying to fix a problem and you come in and say, hey, it's got to happen like this. It's like, well, but ultimately I need Judy to be a problem solver over time. So I'm going to make the investment up front by doing these activities, by hearing her out, maybe even letting her make some mistakes along the way, because ultimately I am building efficiency over time and her capacity to work on that.
Okay, got it. I want to go back and circle back. You said relentless support and relentless opportunities. Is that what you said, or did I capture that wrong?
Relentless support creates limitless potential is what we believe. We believe it.
Limitless potential. Okay.
Yeah, forces people to say, hey, you're up on stage, you're in front of everyone, you got to support. Let's die on that hill of supporting these choices, because I think it's going to yield more ultimately than it would be if we were tearing down choices. That the opposite of a yes and is a no but, and not only is it a silly phrase, but it is so inherent to us to provide no buts in our lives. Again, I got to think of a better phrase, but that mindset, it can really stall out and really prevent us from moving forward.
Totally see that. Yeah. The other thing that I'm picking up is, we talk about, you were talking about failure. Let's unpack failure a little bit more, because I think there's a lot of limited potential by virtue of the fact that people fear failure as a derailer. And so improv sounds like it could be a way to set the stage and the table that it's okay to make mistakes, right? Let's learn from it and move on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And for most people, that probably just comes from how they were raised or childhood. They're just afraid at the idea of either disappointing somebody or messing up. There are a lot of reasons why, but that fear of failure will stop people from even trying to do something at all. And so especially when you've got a team or you've got, employees, people that you want to empower and that you're trying to build something with, you can't let the fear of failure stop them, which will then also kind of stop you from doing whatever it is you're trying to do.
Yeah, and if people see their workspace, whether it's a cubicle or out on the field or whatever it is, as a place where they fail, when they run into the inevitable obstacles of life, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. A failure will be there. So that fear of failure. So again, what are we doing? What have we trained our team on? What experiences have they gone through where we've seen failure and it's been just a step along the way to success? And again, it's easy to think that. It's hard to then say, well, what are we going to walk through with our teams to get there? Austin and I have been performing together for over 20 years, and we've failed on stage more times than I care. Probably me more than Austin. And in fact, I'm performing Friday night, and that fear of failure, it could prevent me from getting on stage. But instead, you go out there knowing you've got your team, and you have this faith that you're going to be relentlessly supported, and we're gonna come up with something that meets that moment, that night, that show, or that time at work.
It's that team support is so critical to this. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Yeah, and that's what people are normally afraid of, is the response or the ridicule or the way somebody else will treat them. And so if you're consistently supporting your team, supporting each other, and whenever you step out to do something, you just know that they're going to have your back.
Yeah, most definitely. So we've heard about, as I think about three things that we've touched on, those fundamentals. It's the yes and. It's the core fundamental improv skill of a yes and, to really bring in different perspectives, explore potential options, really broadening the perspective. That is clearly one that I see. I think that the team support is really fundamental for it to work, but that's trust building, right? You got to have a high trust level within your team, and this would be easier if you had a trust level, just as really anything is. We know that high performing teams accelerate, make decisions faster, they move quicker just because they have that trust level. But it also can be used to facilitate or sort of counter the fear of failure, that we go, yes, and what did we learn from this? Or I could see it there as well, that because what that does is it doesn't place blame. It's like, okay, so what did we learn from this thing, and what are we going to do differently? So I see the application there. Am I reading this right? Am I grabbing this right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's why I've really enjoyed our conversations, Tom. And when we talk about these needs in the workplace, we're just a people-driven business too, and you can't move forward without thinking that the people that you have are such assets for what you need to have happen. And there, some people would even frame it around, we could find the best idea through the multitude of ideas. And how do you do that unless you have systems in place and kind of a methodology that embraces that there are people here and they have ideas, and I need them to get to where we need to go. So let's hear them out. Let's bring it to the table. Let's hash it out, and see if we can get somewhere together.
Yeah, that is so well said. So well said. In some of the leadership work that we do, we use cohorts a lot. We use cohort design programming, because the idea is that cohorts, if they've got a really good solid trust level or a root system, they're more likely to show up more authentically, more real, give each other more candid feedback. And I think that what this can do is to actually build those cultures, as you talked about right at the very beginning, of creating that trust culture, that I'm not going to throw you under the bus. We're going to really, if we make mistakes, we learn from it and move on. It's a way to practice leadership that's inclusive, that is very team centric. And so I see some great applications there, and a fairly simple skill set. I mean, you could learn this stuff. You don't have to be an actor.
Oh, sure. Yeah, no. And, like Flu referenced earlier, the idea that you had to be there, those moments that are just funny, that you can't really explain to somebody and make them laugh. When we have, these activities kind of in our workshops, putting teams together, doing something, it always ends up being you had to be there kind of funny moment. And we want teams, when they get together to make decisions, to have this feeling of excitement, of something's going to happen. We don't know what it is, but we've worked together before and it turns out good. It turns out positive. It's not a scary situation. The fear of failure thing, where you stand up in front of a group and you're just afraid, you kind of freeze up, but we put you in front of a group and it goes well. And that is supposed to be the new memory. Like, making choices, making decisions, especially with these people, is going to turn out something great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, if I could add to that a little bit, we've really had some great opportunities over the past 20 years to take this message to a lot of different contexts. We've done shows in front of custodians. We've done shows in front of teachers. We've done shows. Recently, we did a program with some medical students at TCU. And just, there's so many skills that are illustrated within improv. And it's fun because, and it's probably our tendency, Austin and I, to talk about those who struggle with this sort of stuff. But there's also a bunch of people that have qualities that plug into this really well. And that when you do these improv activities, you just kind of see them shine. And there's something powerful about that too, of like, hey, I've hired you to do this. Like, yes, you're here, medical student, to tell me what medication I need to have because of this itch. That was a bad example. I don't have any itches, not after the last time. But, but like, there's these skills that go along the way with the work that they do, that if we don't hit that note, if we don't embrace that character of them, or maybe grow that character in them, then they can't do the best version of their job. So there's been something really cool about not just doing this and sharing this message and performing, but also seeing a wide range of people, that the application is endless, in the sense of like, we're all improvising, we're all making it up as we go. No one woke up with a script today. So it's just been fun to see different types of people interact with this.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. And we were talking in the prep as we were getting ready to roll here. One of the things that we're seeing with leaders out there in organizations is, how do I deal with a polarity? So I might have a polarity of, I've got to be able to do this and I got to be able to do this. But on the surface, it seems like they're they compete with one another. So for example, it might be, I have to be able to hit the numbers and drive the results and also be innovative. And I could see where this is a way to look for ways to integrate that polarity, so that it's not just a right or wrong, left or right decision. It's a tool that could be used to help facilitate the integration of those. Am I kind of extending it too far, or is there an application there?
Oh no, sure. The flexible thinking, that mindset that you need. I mean, during an improv scene, when you don't know what's going to happen, and maybe there are 2 or 3 different voices coming at you, and then you've got the audience to think about, which could be a bunch of inappropriate drunk voices coming at you also.
Yeah.
And yeah, being in the mindset, being comfortable to have that flexible thinking with these totally opposite things pulling you in different directions. I just think about moms, they got to learn that really, really the hard way. Once you've got, kids yelling at you and you're cooking dinner and, whatever else is happening at the same time. We go through those exercises too.
Yeah, I observed that when I was at the show, where there were some pretty obnoxious people there, and there was not a shutting down. It was like you integrated them in and then redirected into a different direction, but there was not this shutting down or cutting off. It was integrate in, move on to the other space. And it was really very synchronized. It had a flow to it that was really interesting, fascinating to watch.
Yeah, that might be a fun question for you too, Tom, of like what you're seeing as you're working with a variety of clients and businesses too. It's got to be hard to have that pressure of, we got to move forward, we got to get this result. When you're dealing with those polarities, when you feel like and I'm sure there's some ownership of that. That's got to be tough to, just personality wise, sometimes to share the responsibility and to have some of that flexible thinking. Is that what you're seeing?
Most definitely. And I think one of the one example that comes to mind is where leaders have to communicate, share bad news, because people want the truth. They want to really know what's going on. And how do you balance that with a hopeful, opportunistic view of where we're going? So you can hold both at the same time by using a yes, and this is where we're going. This is the situation. These are the brutal facts. We are not performing to the level we need to be, and we need to be moving forward. And these are some opportunities. Let's explore this. It's being real and authentic. And I see where this could have some great application to that particular example.
Yeah, one of the most famous improvisational comedy books is called Truth in Comedy. And once you dive into it, the idea of you're looking for authentic moments, you're trying to find something truthful between this group of people and the scene you're creating. That's very, I mean, yeah, that's very pivotal.
Yeah. Yeah. This is great. Thank you so much for taking the time to share some thoughts on this. How do we integrate improv into our day to day? Some final questions for you guys. What has been the funniest thing that ever happened on stage that you were totally not expecting? You guys have to keep it clean, though. I mean, so, I mean, what's the funniest thing that you just caught you off guard that really threw you off your horse? Is there anything that comes to mind?
One thing that comes to mind, there's a game we play, and this actually was also infuriating, which is kind of why it is funny. We play a game where if you ding a bell, there'll be like a host dinging a bell, and you'll say a sentence, and every time the bell dings, you have to re-say that sentence, and so it just changes where you're going. And you might say, I went to the store, ding. I went to the zoo, ding. I went to see my parole officer, and you just keep changing it. Anyways, we had someone from the audience come up to get to choose when to ding the bell. And from the moment the scene started, she just didn't stop. We couldn't say a single word. She just kept dinging it. And we ended up just standing there looking at her as she was, it's like she forgot where she was. I don't know what was going on. It was maddening and hilarious at the same time.
Michael, do you have one that you want to throw out there before we wrap up?
There's all sorts of little things. And again, improv, it's kind of, you had to be there. All the examples I have, I don't even know if they're good stories, because it's like you had to be there. And I remember Austin and I, we did there's different types of improv. There's improv where you're doing a game, like Whose Line Is It Anyway? There's short form improv where you're doing maybe short scenes. And then there's long form improv where the idea is we're going to spend 45 minutes with each other, and we're going to basically create a play on the spot. And all of those are great, and kind of depending on, as a performer, what you do. And we've dabbled in all of that. And I just remember, I can't even remember all the details, but we interviewed a guy named Jesse, and we did this long form performance where we explored his entire life, and we never found out. It was about, I think, his love interest, and we never found out her name. I think we just forgot to ask in the interview. And then at the very end, we just made the joke that it was Jesse's Girl, like the song. And by the end of, so like this kind of, it's this hour-long thing where we screwed up, and then it all comes together of like, we discovered like, oh, there's a popular song, and so we embedded that in, and we just, the crowd went wild because they weren't expecting it, even though we all knew of the song Jesse's Girl. So again, that's not that funny right now, but that's improv, is that you get to weave together all of these things and kind of make this magical story and have these random moments that don't make any sense afterwards. That's really what my life is, I feel like, in general. But
that's great. And there's some wisdom that, even in the screw ups, they come together, and there's some incredible outcomes. There's some wisdom in that, and we have to be able to kind of tolerate that. You got to go with it. I mean, you really do, is what I'm hearing from you guys.
If we would have paused the show and said, sorry, we forgot to ask what's her name, it wouldn't have been better. We couldn't have.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a forward movement type of practice that you bring. This has been awesome to both of you. Thank you so much. How do people get a hold of you? Do you have like, what's your troop's name? I mean, there's three of you guys, right?
Yes. Yeah. Curtis Needs a Ride, curtisneedsaRide.com, and same Curtis Needs a Ride on various socials.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. You can find us on any of those. And we wrote a book. It's on Amazon now. It's called Teaching Unscripted. It's not as blurry as it looks. There it is.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Anyways, that's available on Amazon if you're into reading and care about education.
How is it? I mean, how thick is it? Is it like a quarter of an inch, or is, because our listeners really like short reads?
Oh yeah. Well, it's quarter to half an inch, but like half of it are like pictures too.
Okay, perfect. So, all right, we'll include that in the show notes. Guys, it's been great having you. Thank you so much for carving out the time. All right, that is a wrap for this episode. That was a fun discussion with Michael and Austin, and I'm grateful that they were able to jump in and share some insights and ideas around how we as leaders can take some of those fundamental improv skills that are played out on stage and integrate those into the stage in which we're asked to lead day in and day out. And so thank you both to them. And if you're ever in Dallas, Fort Worth, look them up. Curtis Needs a Ride. They are great at what they do, and it was a pleasure. Leadership is challenging, and we oftentimes say that the external environment, the context in which we're being asked to lead, the landscape is changing so quickly and becoming more complex. It's like a VUCA world on steroids. And all predictions is that it's not going to slow up. In fact, it's only going to continue to be more ambiguous, more complex. And we've got to be able to get more comfortable in navigating this ambiguity, uncertainty, and really being able to make mistakes and take failures and being able to pivot and change it and not get so anchored into blaming, but really course correct and move in a new direction, keeping that forward movement. And that's where this practice of skills around improv comes into play in such a meaningful way. As we're called to lead in this changing environment, we need to challenge ourselves to apply some different sets of tools, because those old traditional tools that we have historically relied upon are not as effective as they used to be. Some are, but many of them are not. And so hopefully you pulled some ideas from today's conversation that could serve you well as you're trying to work better with your teams and your organizations and trying to accomplish what matters most to all of you. I jotted down a few takeaways from the conversation with Michael and Austin, and so I'll capture those real quick. The yes and principle, that core fundamental skill, is paramount. It drives collaboration, inclusivity, creativity, and ideation. It's a great skill to practice, and it's pretty easy to take on, and it has some great applications. The other line that I mentioned was they talked about relentless support within our team drives limitless possibilities. And I think we all can learn from that principle that as we navigate and work with our teams, we do need to build and cultivate positivity and support and trust within our teams, because I think that limitless possibility side of it will come as we work to build more integrated, more cohesive teams that are supportive of each other. Another one that I jotted down was improv can greatly enhance that positivity. And we do know that positivity within teams will help teams show up more creatively as opposed to showing up more reactively. Another one was improv requires active listening and true presence, meaning that you have to be able to put aside your agenda, your roadmap, and allow others to create the pathway forward. What a great way to think about how we need to delegate and allow others to step forward in taking on more ownership and responsibility. The other one that I jotted down, there is no failure in improv. I thought that was very cool. We go down one path, and if it doesn't work, we course correct and move to another. There's no blame. There's no judgment. We just shift and go. I thought that was a great takeaway. And my final takeaway was unexpected moments in improv can result in the most memorable experiences. And I think that's absolutely true in the work that we do as leaders. And so our challenge is to all of you out there is how do we show up with a little bit more improv in what we're doing? And, we may have the most memorable experiences and the outcomes show up just by virtue of how we lead our teams. We are leading in dynamic times. We all know that. And so my challenge to all of you and my hope was that in this conversation, you grabbed a few ideas around how you could pull your team together and create relentless support within that team to create amazing outcomes. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, we ask that you rate us on your favorite podcast with a rating or leave us a review if you're so inclined. And we really appreciate that. It does help others find this particular podcast. And until next time, we ask that you lead with vision, inspire with action, lead with that courage, authenticity, and of course, humility. And don't forget to bring others along on this journey because it can be very exciting. Have a great day. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.